What happens when two of the best teams in the Big Ten face off? An absolute snooze fest was one of the possibilities, but probably not the one you hoped for. Also not in the cards was another one of the ACC juggernauts to already have to set their sights on next year. A new reminder for all playoff hopefuls that each Saturday is one you have to prepare for, even those you are not that worried about. My name is Jens, and this is your AFCB College Recap Podcast. Welcome back to another AFCB College Recap Podcast. My name is Jens, so glad to have you with us. Joined today by Alexis again, just like last week. It's on a pretty Sunday, like today. It's not a Monday, so we're bringing out this podcast a day before we usually do. Maybe we could do that in the future, because today we'll have the possibility to predict some rankings as well. Usually we have to consume them as they were given to us on Monday. Now we get to predict and see how well we actually know the college football world. A lot of movement we can probably expect after this weekend, because we've had a few pretty interesting games that will have their implications on the rankings. The first one that actually, College Game Day already knew that was one of the great games this weekend. Penn State at Ohio State. We could predict it. It would be a low-scoring game, but I think little of us actually hoped for it or expected that it would be this kind of game. Alexis, you as a Penn State fan, what did you think going into this game? Would a loss be very bad for Penn State, or who could actually lose this game?
Mm-hmm. Well, a loss, of course, a loss is always bad when you're trying to get into the playoffs, but a loss to Ohio State, in Ohio State, you can live with. Of course, you always hope that you win. And going into this game, we all thought Penn State could win this game. Unfortunately, the offense decided otherwise because, both defenses were very good. Ohio State's defense was very, very good at stopping the run, and Drew Allard, his passes just didn't connect with his receivers. So, sorry.
Yeah, it's probably still a bit recapitulating or recovering from yesterday, because it was absolutely one of the games you were pretty hopeful for, that it could go into an offensive shootout, because you had this many, or you had some kind of weapons that you were kind of excited about, with Marvin Harrison Jr. on the offense, or on the Ohio State side. You had the running back duo, Keatron Allen, Nick Singleton, on Penn State's behind Penn State's offensive line. Those two could really wreak havoc, and we weren't really treated to anything because the defense was so good in this game. And although we kind of expected it to be this way, you didn't really hope for it. And what you have to take away from this game, probably in my opinion, is we're seeing two of the best college defenses, but I'm not really sure if the offense of either team is good enough to be of something in the playoffs.
Okay, so sorry for that. Indeed, Penn State's offense was just very bad. We were watching the game, and you could see that there was nothing they could do. You just had to hope the defense would make some plays, and they did actually. They had a pick six, which was then overturned because of a penalty flag, and that's like the moment everything started crumbling down for Penn State, because that defense got penalty after penalty on that drive. Ohio State scored a touchdown, and we never had the feeling Penn State would actually come back into this game, at least not the offense, and that's what happened. Ohio State could just go on if they just keep chipping away some yards, some first downs. But the worst thing is actually the third down conversion of Penn State. They had one conversion, I think, over 16 tries. So that's just bad. I mean, you
the
have
one
to
conversion. The one conversion came at the complete end of the game.
Beforehand, in garbage time, it was over. The game was over, and then they converted third down. Then they scored a touchdown, but that game was over. I want to say Ohio State wasn't that efficient either on third down, so that speaks as to the both defenses that were very good. But this was just abysmal. Penn State was abysmal on offense, and this was their first real test for that offense. The defense, we knew they could play against this Ohio State offense, but that offense was not good enough and needs to improve if they want to get to those playoffs.
No, indeed. What do we have to think about Ohio State and their offense? Because Marvin Harrison had 160 yards plus, so he's always wreaking havoc against Penn State. It's probably one of his most favorite teams. But on the other hand, you feel like Kyle McCord is not really in full control of this offense, and he's playing pretty decent, but not decent enough to push Ohio State.
I actually didn't think he was good either. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. If you think of otherwise.
Yeah, I actually don't think he was that good either. Of course, he had Marvin Harrison Jr., which made him look better because Harrison just got a lot of balls and made plays that other receivers don't in this game. So yeah, McCord and Aller were playing at the same level. I think it's just Ohio State had one top receiver, which Penn State doesn't have, and Ohio State's offense really relies a lot on Marvin Harrison Jr., which was enough against Penn State. But I think they too have to be better on offense if they want to get to those playoffs, because they still have Michigan on their schedule, and some other teams could try and take their place in that playoff spot.
Yeah, and Ohio State got actually pretty lucky because Chop Robinson had to leave the game injured. I don't exactly know when he had to leave, but losing Chop Robinson for the Penn State defense was kind of big because there's one there's one threat on the edge you don't really have to worry about anymore. So that probably played into the cards of Kyle McCord, and not probably, effectively. He had one less threat on the edge they had to worry about. So it all played a bit into the cards of Ohio State. All in all, what can we say about this game to wrap it up? I don't think either team is good enough to be of any meaningful threat in the playoffs, because they either face Michigan or Georgia, and I don't
then
really
maybe
think
disagree,
they have
because Georgia, as they are playing right now, Ohio State could beat them. Maybe Penn State can even beat them if the offense gets a bit better, but the defense can surely beat them. So yeah, Michigan is a favorite for me right now.
Yeah, for me as well. After this weekend, and I know it's kind of unfair towards Georgia because they didn't play anybody this weekend and they were on a bye week. I think Michigan is the best team currently in America, not just the Big Ten, and I think Michigan would have very little or would have some little resistance from those teams, but I think they are kind of on another tier in the Big Ten. It's just Michigan, and then Ohio State, Penn State are at the same level, because I don't think that Ohio State was or is this much better than Penn State, although Penn State didn't really prove anything in this game.
If you play this game in Happy Valley, maybe the result is the other way around. It was just not good offense combined with two very good defenses. So very good defenses against mediocre offenses, and that's what you get.
Yeah, I would be very confident about Michigan playing either at home or away against these two teams. And that's what I think set Michigan apart, because we've had the conversation, I think, a bit in the past to see how we would rank the three Big Ten teams. I think neither of us had Michigan on top. I think you had Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan. I had Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State. I think it was. I'm not really sure, but neither of us had Michigan on top.
I think I had Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan. Indeed, okay. Michigan was a last place team in my ranking a few weeks ago.
Yeah, and I think gradually those rankings started to evolve, and we've talked about it last week that Michigan was actually clearly the better team. And I think now, after these two facing off, it's pretty clear that Michigan is the best team, although every game has to be played. And we'll talk about UNC Virginia later on as well. It can happen every given Saturday. So Michigan is not home free. Every game has to be played, so a lot to look forward to in this Big Ten. Another game that you probably also didn't really fully watch until the end, Tennessee Bama. What can you say about this, except for the fact that Alabama is probably back and to be reckoned with for the SEC?
I wouldn't say Bama is back like they were before. They are in charge of the SEC West. That's sure.
They
That's
weren't
for
there in
sure.
the beginning of the season, and now I have the feeling that they can actually be of some meaning against Georgia, unlike they were last week.
Let's see. Yeah, we saw just a game with two faces. Actually, the first half was all Tennessee. Tennessee was crushing Bama. Tennessee had the game in hand. Bama, of course, scored a few touchdowns. Actually, just one in the first half, but they kept it
Yeah.
within an acceptable range. And then in the second half, everything turned around, and Bama was just crushing Tennessee, and nothing Tennessee could do about it anymore. In the first half, I thought Milton, Tennessee's QB, was doing well. He was doing good. He ran well. He threw the ball very well. Squirrel White was of importance. And then in the second half, nothing connected anymore, and it was all Milroe and Bama. Milroe did the same that Milton did in the first half. Milton did the same that Milroe did in the first half, and the roles were changed, and Bama was just better in the second half. That's what happened in this game, and it's a shame for Tennessee because, yeah, I liked what they were doing in the first half. It was a big difference with what they did last week against Texas A&M. That was a boring game. Here we thought, okay, if Bama loses this one, it's officially over for them. And Tennessee could be in the playoff race because if they won this one, they had Georgia. They could beat Georgia and be in the race again. But that's over. This season is over at least for the playoff hunt. Is over for Tennessee. And yeah, okay, like you said, Bama is back in the playoff talks, at least as an outsider, I think. If they can win out and beat Georgia in the SEC championship game, they can go to the playoffs.
Yeah, indeed. It was indeed a two-faced or a game with two faces for either team. I liked what I saw from Alabama in the second half so much that I actually consider them as not maybe 3 touchdown underdog against Georgia, but maybe a 2 touchdown underdog, because I think that's going to be the spread. I think they're a bit more or the gap between them will be a little bit less. They are still not favorite, but I think Georgia is now more aware of Alabama, and you always want to see how you can close out a game, not how you start a game. It's a matter how you respond. And I think in this regard, Alabama had a much better game than Tennessee because Tennessee wasn't able to finish it. Alabama was. And Alabama was down in the first half. They only scored 1 touchdown. The score was still pretty close, 20-7. But how you respond in the second half is more important than how you play in the first half. And it's the same way around for Tennessee. Doesn't matter how you play in the first half. If you cannot keep this up in the second half, I think now we get to see, or we saw from Tennessee what some of us actually thought all along. Tennessee was, they are down a quarterback and a wide receiver like they had last year. And no disrespect to Milton and his wide receiver core, but it's just not Hendon Hooker and Jalen Hyatt, and they miss those guys. It's okay that you miss them, but you're in the second half of the season right now as well. You'd like them to be better right now. And Florida State, the Florida game wasn't a fluke. Tennessee is just not on the level of last year.
I remember telling you yesterday, where is that air raid they did last year? Okay, in the first half you could see it a bit, but in the second half they just ran the ball, and I know they have good running backs, but you saw it wasn't working. You had to throw the ball sometimes, and they just couldn't do it anymore. So I agree with what you're saying. Milton isn't Hooker, and Squirrel White is not Jalen Hyatt, even though I still believe in his capabilities. But if they just had a better QB, this would have been another story.
Completely. And the QB is so important, and we see it at Ohio State as well. Kyle McCord is okay. He's pretty average. If they were to have a better QB, we would talk about Ohio State as one of the favorites to win the Big Ten. Now we're not, because you don't really have the feeling that Kyle McCord is in full control of this offense. Same as Joe Milton, and it doesn't really help that his left tackle is actually pretty unaware when he's beaten off the edge and then doesn't have the awareness to recover the fumble, because that was one play that you were pretty raging about afterwards, the unawareness of the offensive
Afterwards,
lineman
I
afterwards.
was mad during the play. It was just
Yeah.
ridiculous.
So it was the scoop and score for Tennessee, for Alabama's defense. You saw the left tackle being he was actually looking at his QB when the ball was already out, not
Well,
really looking at
the
the
left
ball to recover
tackle,
it.
he let the defender through. The defender sacked Milton. Milton fumbled the ball. And the left tackle was just looking at the QB that got sacked because of him. And he didn't even see the ball next to him that he fumbled. So he was closest to it. He could recover it. He didn't. Bama scored on it. And actually, that's where the game was over. If Tennessee still had a real shot at that moment, if they drove down the field and scored, they still had a shot in the game. This was game over.
Yeah. Tennessee is out of the playoff race. They were kind of in, but they can still wreak havoc in the SEC because they still play Georgia, and like we said, every given Saturday, and I think it's the name of Josh Spade's tour. Every given Saturday, something can happen. You always have to be aware. So Tennessee is not out; they are just not in yet. Or
Georgia, even if they win that one, they lost 2 games. So Georgia would have to lose another game for them to be in the SEC championship game. I can't see Georgia losing to Tennessee, but or another team, but I can't see them losing twice before the championship game.
Yeah, there are some teams that you'd rather not face in the year. Utah is one of them. Utah is actually still in the hunt for the Pac-12, but it's a team, although they have lost once in the season, and they are without their best QB and tight end, you still don't want to play them because they can always do something against you, especially in the division or in the conference. Same as Tennessee. So the game against Georgia will be 100% full gas. So Georgia will have to watch out for them, even though Georgia on paper is the better team. All right.
Of course.
Another game that probably didn't go as we would have expected. Duke, FSU, Florida State. I expected this one to be closer, although the score isn't really what you would expect from this game when you saw it, because game ended 20-38 in favor of the Seminoles. But the last 3 deciding touchdowns for FSU came in the fourth quarter, after Riley Leonard was out with an injury. So it was actually much closer than you would expect in this game. Also, it was a special teams touchdown as well for Florida State. Closer than you would have expected, but to me, still having the ability to straighten your back and get into it. How you finish a game is so important. Same now here with FSU. They are a top 5 team for a reason. They are actually 4th. I'm not sure if they are 4th exactly, but they are in the top 5. But losing Riley Leonard for Duke was very important, although his stats didn't really show it.
Yeah. Well, I actually watched this game until the end of the third quarter, because then I just had to go to sleep at some time. And then Riley Leonard was already out. But you saw that the Duke defense was just keeping Florida State in check, and that was nice to see that they had a capability. They're not a fluke, as one of the signs in the stands said. Duke is a fluke. Well, they ain't. They're just good. They are a good football team. They are not only that basketball team anymore. But that's also kind of Florida State's fault, to me, because they are good. You just told us they're top 5 in the country. But to me, they should have done better in this game. And they did in the fourth quarter. I agree. I completely agree. It's just that with Riley Leonard as fully healthy QB on the Duke team, I don't think Florida State wins this one. And not with that big a score. It's a bit out of context, this score. It's a 38-20, a difference of 18 points. Duke didn't deserve this. This game was much closer than the score appears to be.
You could actually maybe say the same thing about the Notre Dame game, in which they lost 21-14. Was actually a pretty close game. Notre Dame was able to just finish it out. Riley Leonard also was injured on the second to last play or something. Game was already decided by then, but you do have to see, or if you look at their schedule, their losses came against ranked teams. They won against Clemson in the beginning of the year, but
And
we all know by now that
they could easily have been 7-0.
we all know by now, indeed, they could have been 7-0, but they are not. But
No,
they're not.
indeed.
They are not able to close out a game, and that's a problem.
And that's
And
maybe
Riley Leonard is a pretty good QB, but if you look at his stats, he's not deciding those games for Duke as you maybe want him to. Because before he was injured, his stats are pretty horrible. He was 7 for 16, 69 yards and an interception. That's not a great stat line.
no.
Drew Alar
That's
would
true.
be very jealous of it, but
Yeah, probably. That's true, but his backup was even worse. So with Riley Leonard, you still had those quick passes that he could complete that just got you another first down and another chance at getting into that end zone. With the backup, you knew he didn't have a good game last time he went in, and he didn't have a good game this time. So
yeah.
Florida State knew that they wouldn't have to worry about that backup QB. Okay, of course, you always have to think about it, but he was a lot less dangerous than Riley Leonard can be. So that definitely helped Florida State. Not to say Florida State didn't earn it on themselves; they did it themselves. They have to watch out because I don't have that top 5 vibe with them, as I don't have with any of the ACC teams.
Yeah. To me, it's pretty clear that an unbeaten ACC team, and it's actually the statistics tell it as well, an unbeaten ACC team is not guaranteed a playoff spot.
Yeah, the Pac-12 and the Big 12 are doing too good. The top teams then are doing too good to just count them out for an unbeaten FSU team.
Yeah. But you do see again that Florida State has the ability to straighten out its back. They've done it against LSU. They were beaten to pulp in the second half. Can actually say the same thing about Duke now. They've done it twice. It's a matter of how you finish a game. They finished the game pretty well. That's the understatement maybe here. It's
Maybe
so
just to
important.
add, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's so important to win these games, even if you can call it close. But you still win against a ranked opponent and against a defense that's actually, they're not the best in America, but they are top 10, top 15 in America.
Mm-hmm.
And you
Yeah,
still put up
good
38, although one came on special teams.
They put up 21 in the last quarter when they were worn down. And that's, of course, that's all credits to FSU for doing that. But maybe that's what Duke is looking to change in the future. They're quite new as a good football team. They started last year as a good football team. This year, they're doing even better. But maybe it's some growing pains. I don't know. Maybe they have some growing pains about being good at football, and closing out games will come in the future if they continue on this in this trend.
And Keon Coleman is still one of the best receivers in the country, barring Marvin Harrison.
Keon Coleman is one of the best receivers they had against them. So,
yeah. The last ranked game that we have to talk about or can talk about was Utah against USC. Pretty surprising ending, if we can call it that. Also pretty surprising that it was still close at the end, because Utah was up on USC at halftime. Don't know the score by heart. It was actually 14. It was tight, sorry.
Yeah, and then they went by 2 touchdowns. They had a 2 touchdown advantage.
Yeah, it was in the third quarter that they were up. The way the game ended, you had the feeling that USC could close it out. Another close win, but then the Pac-12, which is pretty good. USC wasn't able to close it out. And we again see that USC is not the team that's able to make a playoff run. Is Utah? Don't really know. Actually, with Utah, you're never sure. But I do know that Utah is a team you never want to play.
No, indeed, Utah is Utah, and they've been a pain in the ass of Oregon for years before this. I've always hated playing them. Yeah, even without Cam Rising and without Kitty, they just win games because that's their mentality. They are a team. They play for each other. They just double down. Yeah, it's just a good team efforts, not individual players, but a good team cohesion that makes them play better than the individual talent on some other teams. And yeah, Utah, actually nobody really talks about them, but they were ranked 14th before this game. They will get top 10 votes, I think, because UNC will be out, of course. And Texas had a close win. They could sneak up on that top 10.
Yeah, indeed. But the thing that is now broken is Caleb Williams' streak of having a touchdown in every single game. I think it was in the 20s. Now broken. He had a rushing TD, but no passing. Is Caleb Williams counter tanking? It's something that we noticed last week against Notre Dame. Two not great outings for the number one pick in the upcoming draft, because he's still the number one pick. We said it last week. We're saying it again. He's still the number one pick, but he's not playing like the number one QB in the country right now.
No, indeed, he doesn't. It's it's actually kind of weird because it's 2 games in a row. We're not used to it from him. What could be? Why could he be that bad in those 2 games? I don't know. I actually don't know. I don't believe he's counter tanking. He can just skip the draft if he wants to. But it's certainly something to look at in the next few weeks. What he's doing.
Yeah, USC is out of the playoff race. Definitely now. This loss seals it. Without the loss, if they would have won, you still had a pretty great win against a Pac-12 opponent that's causing you harm. Now they're out. I think it's maybe good for USC to have this pressure off their back, because nobody expects anything from now. We didn't really after last week, because we actually already knew that they were overperforming the 5-0 or the 6-0 they had. They didn't really play the best opponents, but you also had a feeling that against those opponents they weren't really able to impress against the more difficult ones. Now we just know that they are completely out of the race. There's no way
That's
they are
exactly what will be hard for Washington and Oregon. They can't underestimate them because it's still USC. They still have a lot of individual talent. And USC will have no pressure or less pressure than they did before. So USC will be a dangerous team for both top teams in the Pac-12. So still, USC will be a team to watch. That's nice for them. They won't get to the playoffs, but they can certainly fuck over some other Pac-12 teams.
Yeah, it's the same as Utah. You don't want to play them actually. In the Pac-12, you don't want to play actually anybody from your conference, because that conference is so hard to win against.
Especially Utah. You don't want to play Utah.
Especially Utah and this USC team, as you said, they're so talented. And for the next years, while Caleb Williams will be gone, we still have Zachariah Branch. And I think most of us are in love with the freshman, especially what he can do on special teams, what he can do in the future in the receiving game. Just a matter of who's going to throw the ball to them.
There are some rumors Lincoln Riley may be off to the NFL, so let's see what that gives.
Yeah, with Caleb Williams off to the NFL as well. Or maybe... No, that guy is gone. He's not going to be there.
Maybe he goes where Lincoln Riley goes.
Yeah. Would Lincoln Riley go to the Chicago Bears?
If he has Caleb, maybe.
Maybe he does. That's maybe Chicago's best chance of reeling in Caleb Williams, because we know already that he doesn't want to go there. But maybe if Lincoln Riley goes to the Bears, everything is on the table then. But we'll see. in April what will be the situation for Lincoln Riley. The situation of another team that's probably done for the season as well, North Carolina. And I'll let you have the floor for this one because I know you're quite passionate about it, but everything
Yeah,
went wrong in this game that could go wrong.
it's it's actually just ridiculous because Virginia is one of the worst teams in the FBS. We can safely say that. I still stand by it. In the next few weeks, they will still be one of the worst teams in the FBS. And North Carolina decided to lose to Virginia, of course. I actually think North Carolina just made it hard on themselves because in the first half, the passing game was quite okay, but you are not using the run enough against one of the worst run defenses in the country. Why? Okay, I get you have a game plan and you can try to pass a lot because you have Drake May, you have Des Walker. But when you see it's not working, why don't you change your game plan a bit? Not entirely, but you have to prepare for that not working, even if it's Virginia. And Virginia was stopping them a lot on passing plays, and they still didn't convert to the run. On the other hand, the defense of UNC, which was looking good up until now, I think they just thought, okay, let's go back to last year because that's the level they were performing on in the second half. Everything that I actually kind of forgot the name of the QB of Virginia. Everything he did was good. Everything he did, every run he had, every passing play, not every passing play, of course, but most of them were just on target. Receivers were getting first downs, runners were getting first downs. And then, you still think, okay, it's Virginia, UNC will beat them, it will still go, all will be well. And then you kind of think, okay, but then they have to do it now, and they don't do it. And one of the most, the biggest turning point in this game was like, okay, Virginia fumbles through the end zone in the fourth quarter. So you think Virginia was up at that moment for 4 points. And you think, okay, this is a break UNC needed. They needed to do it. The defense needed a break like this so the offense can go back and get the lead. Drake May gets them to the red zone in 3 or 4 plays. And then they just go fourth and 1, 4 and 2, and out. So they just turn the ball over again. And then you were thinking, okay, this game will be over. Virginia will beat UNC. And that's what they did. Nobody expected that. That's UNC's fault. I think the coaching, Mac Brown should retire. He did a lot of good things, but the last few years, up until now in the season, he was surprising us a bit because the defense was better than we expected. But Mac Brown just hasn't it anymore. He will be better off just leaving it to another coach because that's what the Tar Heels need, in my opinion. Another coaching change with a fresh wind blowing through Chapel Hill, and there's no other way around it anymore.
Well, it's a pity now that the program has so many talented players on the roster, especially on the offensive side of the ball. We have one of the best QBs in the country, one of the most exciting running backs that will be there again next year. But what after Drake May?
Yeah, that's it. You had one of the best running backs in maybe a generation, and you kind of blew it with him as a quarterback because last year he won games for UNC. This year sometimes he struggles, but the defense was okay, and Drake May was okay. And then you see here Drake May had sometimes a tough game passing the ball. Drake May actually wasn't good in this game. He had some inaccurate throws, so not what he usually does. And the defense then just crumbled down against one of the worst teams in the FBS. So I can't put it otherwise than it's coaching. Coaching is playing a big part in this.
Yeah, I think we have seen it time and time again from North Carolina this year before. We attributed it to a pretty tough schedule, but you saw in the previous games against, like I said, the tougher opponents, against Minnesota, against App State, which is a pretty great example. They had they had their issues on offense, and they play pretty good defenses, but you expect more from North Carolina. And that's why when I asked you the question a few weeks ago, which teams are disappointing you, I had North Carolina up there because you expect so much more from this team, especially with the talent that they have. And they weren't able to show it yet. And they're not playing the best teams in the FBS. They're playing tough teams, but they're not playing the best teams. You would still expect them to blow out somebody at some point in the season. And except for Syracuse, which game did they really put away that you were like, okay, clear-cut ACC favorite? They are able to light a fire.
In my opinion, they did. They won against Miami pretty comfortably last week. They won against Pitts pretty comfortably. Syracuse, of course. They up until this week, I still had hope for North Carolina, and they were ranked 10th, and rightfully so. Now you can just drop them. When you lose to Virginia, you can just drop them out of the rankings. And it's just one game. I know they can still win out, but this is a game you just couldn't lose.
Nope.
And I still believe in their talent. I still do. It's just, I don't believe in the coaching anymore, and the defense. Let's not put all the blame on them because, okay, they had a good season up until now. One bad game. It just happens to be against the worst team in college.
Yeah. And this loss knocks you out of the playoff race completely. You can still win out. You can still win the ACC championship because you're not out of the ACC championship race because you're looking at the records over there. One loss doesn't set you back to the back of the line. If you win out, you still play Duke. That game is going to be between 2 and 3. The winner of that game is going to play in the championship game. You can still win the ACC championship. Well. You have Louisville as well, but I would put those two above Louisville.
I do too, but yeah.
Yeah. But it just won't matter. Okay, you have an ACC championship under your belt against. All right, you didn't expect Clemson to be this bad, but you still win against Clemson. You still win against Duke, probably. Then it's just not enough, and it's a pity for this team that they are out of the playoff race because I think most of us would have actually enjoyed seeing them. It's just it's not going to happen.
That's why a 12-team playoff for me is a must discussion that we can have after the season. But yeah, that's why it's a pity some teams won't get into the playoffs. I know there's arguments for 14 playoffs, but teams like this, and maybe it's weird to talk about it because North Carolina just lost to Virginia, but teams like this deserve just a shot at the playoffs. If they lose, fine, but they had their shot.
Yeah, I think starting next year we'll enjoy the playoffs a lot more. It's made for fan entertainment, maybe not always the thing you want to see if you're a purist, but the fan entertainment is going to be through the roof. Everybody's going to look forward to these games. But it's next year.
Yeah, of course.
One team that we can expect in the playoffs is Michigan. And although they've had a pretty easy schedule so far, we can always say that they've played the best team on their schedule so far. If you look at it, is maybe Minnesota or Nebraska. And all due respect to those two teams, but Michigan is just on another level. With Michigan now, you still see, however, that they are blowing out these opponents. It's not like they're Georgiaing their way through the schedule and having some close games or some scares and maybe just running away with it at the end. They're blowing them out. They had like 250 games in a row. Now they're 1 point shy of a 50 game. To me, this Michigan team is clearly the favorite to win the championship because I still would want to see Georgia without Brock Bowers. Still not sure what we can expect from them. They're still a top-tier football team. Don't get me wrong. They're still up there. I just want to see them without Brock Bowers to see how they close out the game. But this Michigan team is for real, and to me, it's the number one team in the country.
Yeah, I agree. I'll be honest, I didn't watch this game, of course, because we kind of expected this would be a kind of a blowout, and they
Well,
just do.
we
Sometimes,
watched it in the first two drives, and then we knew it was
yeah,
going to
indeed.
be a blowout.
We watched
So we
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 watched the
watched
first.
them actually. They were a
Yeah,
first screen at the time.
yeah, and then we just changed it up because
Mm,
we knew this wasn't going to be a nice game to watch as a neutral fan because you just see a one-sided game. But indeed, Michigan is clearly blowing out teams. They haven't had a real test yet. That will come with Ohio State and Penn State. We'll see what they do there. As of now, they are the best team for me in
mm,
college because of what they're doing to those opponents. You
yeah,
can only play who you get against, who you face. That's a phrase we have used a lot last year. This is the case for Michigan. They are blowing them out. They're doing what they should. So,
yeah. They're making statements against teams that you don't expect them to be able to make statements against. That's a very, very difficult sentence to grasp. But
well, you do expect them to win big in this game because Michigan State is just a clusterfuck this year. But yeah, to win 49-0 on the roads to a rival, that's kind of nice.
yeah. Now I'm bringing up an old topic which we didn't discuss beforehand, so I hope I'm not catching you off guard. But the decision of Blake Corum to return proves quite fruitful this year. He's already up to 13 touchdowns. Did he make the right decision coming back? Because maybe he had a feeling that this Michigan team, the 2023 Michigan Wolverines, would be able to put up something in the playoffs. They they
Maybe
they
and
lost last year against TCU, but probably he had the feeling that this next year would be the year for the Wolverines. Maybe it was the
and
right decision for him to come back.
and the running back class was stacked last year, so maybe he thought, okay, he wasn't the first running back, he wasn't the second, maybe the fourth. So maybe he thought, okay, I want to be more valuable than the fourth running back of the board. And this year he proves he could be up there again. Maybe not the first one, maybe again the fourth. But yeah, he's helping Michigan do things that they couldn't do without him because Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards are very important to this team. But still, NIL plays a big part in this. Like Bo Nix got back to Oregon, a few players just came back. NIL is playing a big part in this too. If it weren't for NIL, Blake Corum was off to the NFL. That's for sure.
Yep. Yeah. But Michigan is really reaping the profits from his decision to turn back or come back. But
Indeed.
still, we do have to see what they put up against Penn State, which will be a very difficult game at Penn State. End of the season game against Ohio State is still going to be very difficult. It could be very well that Michigan loses those two, and you could be surprised, but it's still the Big Ten. And
if they lose those two, they're out. Actually,
yeah, and then
that
it
would
doesn't
be
really matter.
that would be a
Who you
plot
threw out.
twist that we all. Yeah, of course it needs, and that's college. It can always happen. We know in every sport everything can happen, but this is a real possibility that Michigan loses to both, and then suddenly they go from the best team in the country to not even the playoffs.
Yeah. Now I'm gonna take 3 games at once because actually the conclusion is quite the same. Favorites that keep it a bit too close for comfort: Oklahoma, UCF, Texas and Houston, and Arizona State against Washington. Washington, Texas, and Oklahoma are favorites in their division, but they keep it so close in those 2 games. Do we need to draw conclusions, or can this happen?
Yeah, they're number 5, 6, and 8, so you expected these games to be easy for them. But yeah, let's start with Washington. I don't know why they scored just 15 against Arizona State, but that should be more. With that offense, that should be more. The defense did their job. They just kept Arizona State to 7 points, so that's fine. But the offense should watch out for the next few weeks.
Yeah.
Oklahoma is overrated. I mean, they're 6th ranked. They beat Texas, I know, but they are overrated. They have been since the beginning of the season. And that's showing in those games. UCF is not an easy opponent. They're not ranked. They're not good, but it's never an easy opponent, especially for Oklahoma. So that is a factor in this game, but Oklahoma is not the sixth team in the nation. They won't keep. They will maybe keep their spot this week, although Oregon could gem them. I don't know. We'll see that later. But Oklahoma will not end the season as a sixth place team for me. And then Texas, again, against a rival. Houston is an in-state rival. Houston is a tough opponent to play. As UCF, they were both coming to the Big 12 this year. But if you're a Texas fan, you look at the beginning of the season and you're looking at your team now, you're thinking, okay, we were a deadlock playoff candidate. Right now, I'm not sure they're a deadlock playoff candidate anymore.
Yeah.
So,
we'll have to see what they do next weeks. You can always have this one game in the season where you kind of struggle, but you can still keep the opponent at bay and close out strong. You keep the win. On to next week's. The players, they don't really look at how they win. They just want to win. Even if it's closed, you need to win. But it's going to be very important in the next few games for Texas, for Oklahoma, and for Washington to put down some very strong performances, because the playoff rankings are going to be out next week, after next week.
Yeah,
you're going to want to impress the voters and the people making up those rankings that you belong in the playoffs, because we have a few spots that seem already to be earmarked for two teams, Georgia and Michigan. If everything goes well, you can expect those two. After that, it's a crapshoot. You have FSU, you have Ohio State, you have Washington, Oklahoma. You still have Penn State, you have Texas. Those teams are all fighting for those two remaining spots.
And Oregon. Let's not forget Oregon.
And Oregon, indeed. Yeah, they won against Washington State. A pretty good win, although it was kind of close in the beginning. They ran away with it. Bucky Irving is the best player on that team.
Yeah, of
Bo
course.
Nix is a very good
second.
quarterback, but Bucky Irving is the best player on that team.
Indeed. Just to come back on Texas a bit, they have the luck in actually that the teams before them didn't play well either. Washington didn't play well. Oklahoma didn't play well. Penn State lost. So they just stay put to me right now. So because the other teams didn't play well, that's good for Texas, and they still keep their chances. Of course, they won, so they have their chances. But that's important to look at for the playoff committee.
Yeah.
Maybe just a little shout out to Mississippi State and Arkansas, who thought that it would be fun to score even less than Iowa or score even less than Air Force against Navy. A score of 7-3. Nobody expected this, and I'm
Really
happy.
impressive.
I'm happy I didn't watch this game, because what the hell? What the hell was this? 7-3. That's two scores, one field goal and one touchdown. If you're an Arkansas fan, Dirk, I wouldn't be too happy.
No. Arkansas is prototypical average team, but this is just below average. I'm glad we didn't watch it as well, because I wouldn't really feel too good about watching that game afterwards. I think we chose the right games to watch. All right, on to the rankings. Nothing will change actually on the top. You have Georgia, which will still be the number one team. Michigan will be the second ranked team. What will change, in my opinion, is the first place votes that Michigan will get. They now are currently at 16 against the 43 for Georgia. If it's not over 20, I'm going to be very surprised. I would expect Michigan to break through that barrier of 20 first place votes. It's four more. I think I can see plenty of voters putting them now first.
Yeah, of course, I see that happening too, especially because Georgia didn't play. So people don't have in their mind what Georgia did this weekend. They didn't have a win. They just didn't play. So Michigan will take some votes for the first place.
Yeah. And then I think it will be fairly the same. Ohio State will remain in 3. Florida State will remain in 4. Washington will still be 5th. Oklahoma as well. Penn State, big discussion, but how many places do they drop after losing to Ohio State? Because Texas won, Oregon won.
2. They're dropping 2.
Yeah. And then
you
they
put
are
Texas
still ranked.
And you put Texas and Oregon before them, maybe even Oregon before Texas. But for me, that's 7, 8, and 9 is Oregon, Texas, Penn State.
Yeah, I can actually see Oregon jumping Texas as well. So Texas would stay put at 8 then. Oregon would just jump Texas, and Penn State would be behind Texas. North Carolina,
Just drop them.
yeah, you could expect them to be dropped very
It
far
won't
in the
happen.
rankings, but
Yeah,
I think they will still be in the AP poll.
yeah,
And
they
then
won't get out.
for some or the other reason, Alabama will be then in 10th place, which was this great discussion we had. How many places do you move up Alabama? We came at 0, but we didn't expect North Carolina to lose. So
we discussed that before North Carolina played. So we just had them staying put, but because North Carolina, they jump on spot.
Yeah. Other teams, Air Force. Do you improve their standings or do you keep them at 22 because they won against
Navy?
Yeah.
They won against Navy in a close game, 17-7. It's always those games. They're always hard, even though Air Force is clearly the better team. Is clearly better than other Mountain West teams. It's difficult. Louisville didn't play. Missouri won. You could make the case to, one spot maybe to the 21st place. You just put them before Louisville. I don't think they'll jump USC.
It all depends because Tennessee is probably dropping a bit as well. But I think they will still be ranked a bit before Air Force because they lost against Alabama. I don't see them being.
And USC lost to Utah, both ranked matchups, close ranked matchups. I think their ceiling is 21st. It could be 19, but I don't think voters will do that.
Yeah. Teams that will drop out of the playoff or out of the AP poll. Iowa lost against Minnesota. Pretty impressive how the scoring it was again. But Iowa is now 6-2 with a loss against Minnesota. They are probably out of the rankings and they're probably not going back in again. The average of 25, which they aim for with Ferenc as an offensive coordinator, is probably pretty difficult to attain this year. Is JMU going to be ranked?
Yeah, because you're dropping Iowa. Actually, Iowa is the only team that will drop from this, come to think of it. And JMU is the first team in line. Clemson lost, Florida didn't play, I think. Washington State lost, Fresno State, I don't know actually. But yeah, JMU comes in at 25th.
Yeah, indeed. We can expect JMU to be ranked. So now we have both Air Force and JMU teams that people have been screaming about in the previous weeks. They are now going to be ranked. Everybody's going to sleep pretty well after this week.
We actually forgot about Duke. So you have Duke, Tennessee, and USC that will be dropping. So LSU will move up a few spots, and Missouri will too.
Yeah, I think Duke will drop behind Tennessee because their loss is a bit bigger than Tennessee.
Think so?
I think they will.
I think they will because fair. I don't think it's fair actually. Looking at both games, Duke.
Have you already known the AP poll to be fair?
Yeah, that's true. But to really make Duke pay, Tennessee lost badly too. It was 34-20, I think.
Yeah, but.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting
I think
one.
because Tennessee had this pretty great first half. They just crumbled in the second half. But
yeah, maybe
people still loves Alabama.
Did the voters watch the game or not?
If they look at the scoreline, they probably really difficult one. I'm going to call it. Duke is going to be behind Tennessee in the rankings if they are in the rankings.
Just one last remark from my side: Ole Miss is just being sneaky all season long, but they still have only one loss. They're ranked 13th, just behind Alabama, and they have quite an easy schedule up until Georgia. So let's watch out for Ole Miss.
Well, they still play in the SEC West, so it's going to be pretty difficult because Alabama is on there. Alabama, I'm not sure how much they are going to lose. If they are going to lose, they still play LSU. They play at Kentucky. They play Auburn. They could as well go 4-0 in the 4 remaining games. They could maybe lose one, but they have the tiebreaker against Ole Miss, so indeed you have to watch out for them. But
it's an interesting one to follow, I think. If Bama loses against LSU next, they have a bye, so the week after that, if they lose to LSU, Kentucky is a hard one, and Auburn too. So Ole Miss fans will be hoping, that's for sure.
Yeah, indeed. Great things to look forward to, as always, with college football. All right, we're still below an hour, and we'll probably keep it this way. Unless you have any other things to talk about, I think we
I
can wrap
said
this one up.
everything except for that was not a very nice weekend for my teams.
Yeah, I didn't want to really mention it, but Tennessee, Penn State, North Carolina, pretty tough weekend.
Lucky, I'm still an Oregon fan too.
Yeah, well, you're very much in luck indeed with Oregon because they can actually do a lot of damage still. If they win against Washington in the Pac-12 championship, I see them as a playoff team, and a playoff team that you probably have to prepare pretty well for. All right, this is it from us, everybody. Thank you for listening. This was your AFCB College Recap podcast. We'll be back next week recapping another great weekend. And thank you very much. You can find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You can find us on YouTube. Give us a like, give us a thumbs up, and subscribe to our newsletter, which will be coming out each week. All right. Thank you very much.